Well,
Welcome back.
thank you.
You ready? We're missing Mike, he's on his way.
Oh, okay, we can wait.
Um, Monique has to go pick up her kids, too. So.
Then we won't.
Proceed.
I can be very accommodating.
Sometimes these things happen. So we're going to start some questions. We have some different questions relative to finding out a little bit more about you. So I'm going with the first one, which is, based on your research and what you've learned about our city and your visit yesterday, and I guess a previous council meeting, please describe your level of interest in this position.
I do believe that I have a lot to offer the city of Eastpointe, especially items that are currently pending before city council or were pending a couple of months ago. As I had indicated yesterday, I pointed out 6 items that I saw that the city is currently working on: the rental program, code enforcement, internal control review, master plan implementation, animal control going to the county, and the purchasing ordinance amendments. These are items that I've either worked on personally and directly, or in some cases may have supervised or assisted, and that was mostly with the animal control. I was the gentleman who had to draft the ordinance to eliminate all the dog ordinances so that the county could take over the animal control in Pontiac. I've got that type of experience. I also realize that not too far in the distance, there's going to be some potential financial issues, especially if the stock market would stop rising, maybe go backwards, and then we would have some problems with the valuation of our pension plan. I have some ideas on how to address some of the revenue shortfalls. I'm familiar with all of the tools that have been used in communities, and there are some that haven't been used but are still available to the city of Eastpointe. So I believe all of that experience and knowledge. Also, I do still have connections with the Michigan Department of Treasury, with the office that I used to work with on a regular basis. They have now turned their attention to assisting cities from going into a financial emergency position. So I believe I can always contact those contacts to assist as well. Have experience working with federal government, housing and urban development in particular. I guess it's been close to 20 years. We had a little issue with the Justice Department when I was in Hamtramck, so I was part of the negotiating team. I know you have a little issue right now that's pending, so hopefully a little bit of insight may be helpful over there as well.
Great. All right, we'll move on to Sarah.
How would you describe your management and leadership style? Please identify both strengths and weaknesses you related to that style.
I would definitely say I lead by example. Being that throughout my career I have served as a department head, I've done the work. I've even done the work of line staff, so I understand the challenges that the employees face on a daily basis. I can empathize with them, and as a manager I would understand what their needs are. I can put myself in their shoes, and I think that's very important, that the staff knows that their boss really understands and knows what they're going through on a daily basis. Even during the meet and greet today, I had the opportunity to talk to some of the employees about some of the challenges that they face on a daily basis. I definitely pay attention to detail. I read. I try and make myself very familiar and comfortable with everything that is being presented to City Council so that I could speak as the expert on the subject matter. I don't want to have to rely on the department heads or the staff to support presentations. If I'm going to be presenting it to you and I'm making a recommendation, I better know what I'm talking about. So I do pay a lot of attention to detail. I also follow the rules, and I expect my staff to follow the rules as well. Sometimes it can be said that paying too much attention to detail means that you can't see the forest through the trees, so that could be considered a weakness potentially, but I think it really is an asset to have a manager who really understands everything that's going on in the community. I do believe in the chain of command, so I will be relying on department heads to report, and if necessary, to take orders down to the staff if any changes need to be implemented. But I, in turn, then will be reporting to you. And I will have department heads prepare annual reports in writing with performance statistics that will be applied and evaluated on an ongoing basis. We will have quarterly reports, at least from the building department, because that seems to be a rather salient issue here in the city of Eastpointe, especially on the code enforcement and on the rental side. I will have monthly reports reconciled, bank statements reconciled by the 10th day of the following month, with cover letters presented to City Council, and have all these reports published on the city website so that the public knows what's going on. It's very important that the information be shared with the public, especially if the city is going to be facing any difficult circumstances. People don't like surprises. You as a council don't like surprises. I'll be dealing with them on a daily basis, but your job is to ensure that the city continues to move forward, and I'm here to help you to do that.
All right. Mike, do you want to take number 3?
Sure. First, I want to apologize to council. I'm very sorry. I thought the meet and greet started at 3. Clearly not the case. So I apologize for that. And I just want to catch up. Are we going through all of these and then doing?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. All right. And I apologize for being late to you as well. Please describe the process you would follow to comprehensively evaluate the current operations of the city and to develop innovative improvements.
Hopefully I've already started by preparing for this interview. I would ask at least that council, if it hasn't already formally recognized any goals, because I haven't been able to find any documentation, to do so after having a goal-setting session. That will help me understand exactly what you expect. Manager can't do his job unless he knows what the bosses want the manager to do. So a goal-setting session is something that I would be requesting where council would actually formally approve goals that I could then follow. Concurrently, I would develop a three-pronged strategy. Number one, I want to obtain a comprehensive understanding of the management of the city by reviewing charter, code of ordinances, all policies and procedures, job descriptions, union contracts, and I will also observe operations, sort of be a fly on the wall, see how things work. Do they work the way that the policy and procedure manual says it does? If it doesn't, something needs to change because we need to be consistent. I will also establish clear communication with the public by reviewing the website, reviewing the telephone directory, making sure that if you press a button it goes to the right person, establishing relationships with the county and neighboring governments, reestablishing old relationships that I had from my previous employers, and meeting monthly with the local Chamber of Commerce as well. We need to keep the public informed as to what's going on, and that's also my way of understanding what the public concerns are. And finally, I would obtain a comprehensive understanding of the finances. Well, everything flows through finance, but you've got to understand everything before you understand how the finances relate. So I would identify and examine all services offered by the community, obtain performance data. I am a data-driven person when decision-making. There has to be something to support what I'm going to be proposing or what I'm going to be doing. I'm very good at quantifying total costs of various programs, cost of personnel, cost of contracts, identify any underused revenue sources. I've already identified at least one, rather significant one here in the city. Review all fees to make sure that they are recovering costs. And also review all internal controls. It's very important that whatever decisions are made, that the public has trust in that the finances of the city are well taken care of. So that's really my management plan, and it's going to be rather chaotic, if you will, not to mention meeting with city employees, department heads, community organizations as things go. So I sort of have it already down in writing, just have to implement it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Monique?
Yes, good to see you again. How do you hold direct reports accountable for projects and/or issues you've delegated to them?
I am a person who believes in writing. Emails generally a good way of memorializing communications. So assuming that it's a request with a deadline that is given orally, I would probably follow up with an email. In the event that I'm seeing poor performance, start off with a conversation. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding. Try and work out any misunderstandings if there are any. If there's a technical problem or an equipment problem, try and meet those challenges as well. I would have to review the employee personnel manual to see exactly what the proper disciplinary steps are, what goes before civil service, what doesn't go before civil service, what's handled in some cases ultimately before city council. So I'd have to become acquainted with those policies and procedures, follow those as necessary. Once again, it's situational. Depends on what the situation is. If it's something unfortunately criminal, then obviously I would go in a certain direction than if it wasn't criminal and it was something minor. But you can't let too many minor things go because then they can become something major. So it's really situational, but rules, policies, and procedures and union contracts that are currently in place will be followed.
Okay. And that's in conjunction with the, bi-weekly meetings with those directors? Like
Department heads I meet with on a weekly basis.
A weekly basis?
Weekly basis.
Okay.
Unless, of course, we have a very, very short week. I think that's usually the Christmas and New Year's week, so we may get away with one less meeting at that time.
Mr. DeMonico?
Please describe a situation when you've disagreed with your governing board. How did you approach that difference of opinion, and explain the final result of the situation?
Well, the governing board always gets its way. So the day that I was officially removed as city administrator from the city of Pontiac, where local control was actually returned to the city, it was a regularly scheduled city council meeting on that particular day. So this was the first meeting. It was actually not even an hour where full local control for the most part had been restored. And an agenda topic at that meeting was the acquisition of a property to reestablish the Department of Public Works in the city of Pontiac, because under emergency management all the services had been subcontracted. Prior to the meeting, the city became aware of a property it could acquire at basically no cost, and I had arranged to have the facility properly inspected with all of our building trades. DPW director was down there to inspect the facility. Also was aware that the property was previously owned by a large industrial corporation and had an environmental report about that thick. As I said, I pay attention to detail, so here I am reading a 200 and some page environmental report and trying to summarize it in a 2-page memorandum to the city council. Well, my recommendation was actually twofold. Number one, don't take the property because it has some potential environmental concerns. And number two, don't consider bringing back Public Works, because if you look at the financial analysis which I am providing for you, the money doesn't work. Granted, City Council, that's my recommendation. I'm no longer your city administrator, but do this information what you will. So undoubtedly the City Council voted unanimously to go down that path. Once again, City Council does get its way, and that was fine. I was fine with it. I did my due diligence. Council wanted me to investigate. I investigated. I didn't agree with the decision or with the path that they may potentially go down, but I provided them the best information possible. I also gave them pros of potentially bringing back the Department of Public Works as well. Make a long story short, I found out several months later that when they conducted an environmental test, the property was contaminated. So as of now, It appears as though public works services in Pontiac are still being performed by contractors. But council wanted to go down that path, and that was fine, and even though my time with the city was limited after that, I supported whatever decision that the city council made.
Thank you.
All right, so if you're selected as our next city manager, what do you predict your tenure would be?
I serve at the pleasure of the city council, so as long as you would want me here, I would look to be here.
So we're also asking if you predict yourself to be in this location because you might be moving away, or you have other plans somewhere along the way.
I don't have any plans in the foreseeable future. And if you look at my career record, I've stayed around quite a long time. One departure was because of a long round trip. It just became too much, and another one was because I did my job and I lost it, so. And I chose to, I actually had an opportunity to stay on with the city of Pontiac in my old position, but I felt it would be best if the overseer would fade into the darkness so that the city could properly return to local control without anyone whispering, oh, the state still has eyes watching what's going on over there.
So I just had to ask the question, when you were with Hamtramck, you were also working with Schimmel, correct?
That is correct.
And then when he left, did you also leave from that position?
In a sense, yes and no. He had given up a lot of local control, I think for about 6 months, and was returning to mayor and council. And then at the time, the voters had approved a new city charter. And the positions that I was holding were named in the old charter, not really in the new charter. I didn't want to create any problems, so I said, well, I'm just going to disappear. And I stayed on with Mr. Schimmel, who was still responsible for labor contract negotiations, and we were preparing for an Act 312 with the fire department union. So I wasn't officially an employee with the city, but I was a contractor, and as soon as that contract was settled, at the arbitration table actually, and I started with the city of Algonac.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any questions for us?
Be kind.
I am a little curious as to what motivated each of you to run for public office. Because if you look at the environment today, especially today, seeking a position in public office could be downright cruel.
Well, for me, it's because I chose Eastpointe to raise my family in, and I decided that I wanted to kind of give back and to not only to the community, but I felt like I would be like an asset to the council, having a family, and I've lived here almost my whole entire life. So I felt like I was dedicated and devoted to the city, and so I just decided to go forward with running for council.
Mr. Kleinfeld?
Sure. Everyone kind of knows that I was raised in a household where civic engagement was very important. And all through college, I worked for nonprofits and things like that. And I think for me, I also have interest in government. I worked for the legislature for a little bit. I just feel the need to get involved. I can't stand back and just watch everything happen without speaking up. So.
Well, I was never, I just been here for like 9 years as a resident of Eastpointe. I grew up in Detroit, and so the lifestyle that's here, quiet and things like that, I didn't experience that as a child. And so when I moved here, and I wanted my kids to have better, the Eastpointe that I knew years ago was quiet, crime was low and things like that. So my car got stolen when I was in Eastpointe, just short of 5 months living here. And it was like it was really bad for me. Like, that's not what I want my kids to be around. And at that time, I was a police officer as well, so it was really a twist for me to be always the hero and I'm the victim. And so I told myself, how can I change what's going on for my kids and for other people? And it wasn't being city council. It was just to be a mentor, or how can I help, the community. And so the position came up at city council, and so, you know, I'm here today. But my whole goal was to make the city what I knew it to be years ago, and I seen some of those things starting to be less and less as the crime got higher. I said, what can I do to, you know, lessen that? And so being a public official, I felt like I can help with that, and so that's why I'm here.
All right, I have to thank my fraternity brother Donald, I think, for getting involved in government. In college, well, I guess back up to high school. In high school, I wasn't involved in student government or anything. I played sports and then did some community service, did like National Honor Society, but nothing really with the government. And then in college, my fraternity brother Donald said, why don't you run for the student senate? I'm like, that sounds kind of cool. You could be a senator of student government. I probably had no idea what that even meant at the time. But I'm like, okay, if you're doing it, it's probably a good thing. Went about that and then just kind of got involved in that, got involved in like a statewide student government group, met my wife Alyssa through it, so it's been good. And then it's just rewarding to be part of something like that where you're working on issues that are really intense or large and you see a positive outcome eventually, so it's very rewarding. So I figured once college was over, got appointed to a board, the Zoning Board of Appeals in Eastpointe, and then ran for council.
So I hated politics. Absolutely hated politics, but I grew up in this city. My grandfather moved out here in 1910, so the family's been out here for 100 and some years. But this is a town that I grew up in, went to high school, just like everybody else here, except for Monique. We've all graduated from the high school. And I've been on council now. This is my 11th year as mayor, but I had been on councilwoman for 2 years before that. So I had moved around with a military husband. When I came back, I was really upset to come home and see the downtown area just degenerate. I felt that there was a lot happening that needed to be corrected. And so somehow I retired from my nursing job of 42 years and ended up running for office. And don't ask me how that connected, but that's where I've been and that's where it is. And I think in the last 12 years, I've seen some positive changes. We've gone over some really hard rocks with the recession. But with the council, we've managed to come through a lot of that. We've developed a fund balance where we were down nitty-gritty like everybody else, but we have some very creative department heads in this area. We've had some really outstanding city managers, and I think we're moving in the right direction. And I have one more year to say, okay, we did it. So I would guess we did have a couple questions that were given by people from the audience from last night. So we'd like to ask those as well. So Sarah, do you want to ask the first one?
Sure. What are your goals for the city of Eastpointe in regards to like businesses and recreation and things like that?
Obviously, I need to learn what the goals of the city council are. So I would try and fulfill those goals. In the literature that's been provided, and based on the action that's the city's already taken to become a redevelopment-ready certified community, my goal would be to continue to expand on those priorities and also introduce some of the thinking from the One Stop Ready program, which has been highly successful in Oakland County, merge those two together. Keeping a vibrant commercial district is very important for a community that's really considered a bedroom community. You have to have the services available locally for your resident population. And the only way that that can happen now in a competitive environment is to be business friendly. And based on previous actions taken by this city, I believe you're going in that direction, and hopefully during my review I'll be able to determine if there's any other assistance that I would be able to lend as well. I did state that I would like to meet on a monthly basis with business association. I'm assuming that's going to be the Chamber of Commerce. And to tell you how those meetings, I usually held them in Pontiac, is the head of the business association would send me an email a couple days before the meeting and let me know what some of the major questions or topics of discussion were going to be at our meeting. And I, in turn, then would funnel to the appropriate department heads and have responses at the time of the meeting. So they just weren't simply get-togethers, and we had to get things done. So I think those were successful. And like I had indicated yesterday, the Pontiac Downtown Business Association was an award-winning Main Street program. And they had some challenges to face because they really didn't have full-time staff, and that's sort of one of the requirements to be a Main Street community, is to have full-time staff. I supported them in every endeavor that they proposed.
Do you want me to ask the? All right.
Go ahead.
I think you touched on this actually a little bit today and yesterday as well. But I'll ask the question. Tell us about a situation at any job you've ever had that you found stressful.
I guess you can say I've had the extremes. Obviously, my time in Hamtramck and Pontiac was not a piece of cake. And in Algonac, there was a time when we had so much money, I had to figure out where the best place to invest it was when I was city treasurer. At the time that I was treasurer, we started having interest rates going down, so it was staggering the CDs and whatever to try and keep that interest coming in. You have to deal with whatever situation that comes your way. It's not within your control. It's life. You deal with it. You can't let it affect you. I think I'm a relatively calm person. Don't let things get to me. And if they do get to me, hopefully I don't show it. Try and keep a straight face and address the situation and move on ahead. Always want to have a backup plan, and I'll give you an example. Walked into my office in Hamtramck one day, stepped my foot down on the floor, and I heard a splash. Stepped another foot, another splash. Had water this high in the entire office. That office serviced 4 different departments. I can't have staff working in standing water, and for that matter, didn't even know where the water was coming from. So within 2 hours, I had 4 offices relocated to another part of City Hall. We didn't find out where the leak was until almost 12 hours later that day. So if I hadn't had a backup plan, you know, what happens if I can't operate out of this office? We would have been down, and that was the building department, the Department of Public Works, the water department, rental, code enforcement, a lot of customer service coming through. It may have been a bit inconvenient to send the customers up to the 2nd floor of City Hall since they couldn't do the business on the 1st floor, but I think they were grateful for the inconvenience rather than having no service until we were able to do the proper restoration work to the office.
So, Monique, do you want to take the question cards from last night?
Yes, ma'am.
Do the first one, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor. The next question is, how will you be instrumental in moving Eastpointe into the 21st century and growing Eastpointe?
I think moving Eastpointe into the 21st century is to introduce as much technology as possible into improving the efficiency and effectiveness of service delivery. I've had a couple conversations with some of the staff. Even on the cable side, I understand you're still on analog technology. We went to digital in Pontiac. We had live streaming of our council meetings on the city's website. We had the meetings available to the public on the city's websites for those that didn't have TV. That's that communication that I keep talking about. It's nice to read the minutes, but I think it's better. I think you appreciate an interview seeing me face to face than rather asking me questions and me typing on a typewriter or a computer and responding to you. Residents feel the same way. They want to be involved, but they may not want to get in their car and drive down to a meeting. So I will embrace technology. My understanding, talking with Mr. Bloom, is that the BSNA systems are fully integrated, so I don't have to worry about that. But if they weren't, I would fully integrate those and hopefully have some model databases that BSNA could use for their training sessions. In terms of service delivery, residents expect and demand a good service for the high taxes that they pay, ensure through data that we are delivering the most effective and efficient service as possible. And then from the business community, for those who are in private business, government seems to get in the way. And we, as government, need to recognize that, also with the competing interests that the residents want to have a little bit of control as well, find that fine balance, and be accommodative to both the businesses and the residents, because in some cases there are competing interests. But one part of the One Stop Ready training is to get the decision makers, recommenders on the planning, zoning, and other types of boards and commissions to understand what the mindset is of a business person or a developer as they're coming into a city, why they're choosing a particular location, how much time and money they invest before they even make that application. So keeping all of that in mind, I think, is very important. If you're looking towards the redevelopment ready, that seems to be the way the state of Michigan is proposing that local units go. In Oakland County, it was One Stop Ready, which is similar but has different nuances. So this pro-business mentality, I think, is a way of moving things forward into the 21st century as well.
Okay, thank you.
Cardi?
All right, road construction's a big topic of conversation in Michigan and a large budgetary concern for many cities. Describe your thoughts on, again, the not so current work stoppage facing our state. Apparently, as of today, is no longer a stoppage, but your general thoughts on roads or any answer to that question?
I can't believe that it actually happened. No side is going to be winning on something like that. And it's just a total disservice to all of us who pay taxes. It's definitely going to be a challenge in local communities, because when you look at roads, it's not just what's the pavement on top, but it's also what's underneath. You've got your water and you've got your sewer. Speaking with one of the supervisors in the DPW, learning that there's some, what I would call, preventative maintenance that hasn't been going on. So it makes me worry exactly what the actual state of our infrastructure is here. When you hire someone to do a job, they need to get the job done. And you just can't do things like that now.
All right, thanks.
So I get the last question, I guess.
The fun question.
All work and no play is not fun. So we'd like you to maybe share some fun, creative ideas that you might have for the city of Eastpointe and kind of dream big. Not only things that are feasible in a practical sense.
To really truly give you a good answer to that question, I think I would have to get a better flavor of the community. I have a reason to believe that there is a car culture here in town, that people enjoy music, people enjoy art. There are currently activities that are presently being organized by outside groups. If those are highly successful, we need to continue to support those. I really need to get a good feel for the community to give you a good answer to that question. And you as council members could also provide me with that information as well. I'm not opposed to thinking outside of the box. Essentially, that's what emergency financial management is. It is thinking outside of the box. How do you get the job done with limited resources? So definitely there has to be that. It's healthy for a community to have the serious side and the fun side, and we need to support that.
All right. Anyone else have more questions?
I had a question. I want to ask you, with the resources and that's in Eastpointe and around Eastpointe, what would be some of the things? It's a little bit similar to what the mayor asked, but the things that you researched about Eastpointe, the things that we have already, what would make some of people want to move here back to Eastpointe, and what ideas can you grasp from what we already have that would be a great idea?
Public relations, I think, is very important. We need to tout the successes of the community, get good positive press. Don't just be in the main newspapers when something bad happens in town. That's one thing, good PR. Number two, I need to really find out what types of services that the county of Macomb can offer the taxpayers in the city of Eastpointe. Oakland County, we had a lot of support from the county government over there in a variety of services. I need to know what's available here, and if it's not available, ask, well, why isn't it? Why don't you offer it? Working with the neighboring communities, I think, is very important. The concept of regionalism is very salient in many presentations that are made to big corporations to attract business, large corporations to come and settle within the area. Did Eastpointe have anything to offer when the state of Michigan made that offer for that firm from China, Foxconn, I think it was, or for Amazon? I know other communities were able to offer something. What was Eastpointe? Was there something that could have been offered? You need to stay on top of things like that. Testimonial from residents. When I was in Pontiac, we did a video. It's no longer on the website, unfortunately, but we had it posted on our business page of testimonials from developers and business people within the city about how the city assisted them, how good it was to do business within the city of Pontiac. Maybe having a resident testimonial on the city's website. You do have a few videos out there, but it's really nothing coming from the heart, if you will. It's just the standard. Probably was a contribution of some sort, very cheap, if any cost whatsoever. A standard type of a video. Everybody can do that, but how many people can say, well, I've got 25 residents here talking about all the great things that can be offered by the city and why I'm living here? Sort of why I asked the question, well, why are you on city council? It gives me confidence that should I be offered and accept this position, I'm going to be working with 5 individuals who have a stake in what happens in this community and aren't here for other reasons. They're very good reasons, and I appreciate something like that. So you need to toot your own horn. You need to tell your own stories, get it out there into the public as much as possible. If someone posts a negative comment on one of the social media sites, it can't be ignored. It needs to be responded to. Now, I'm not a Facebook or MySpace or whatever other types of social media there are out there, but I know that once it's out there, it needs to be addressed. And my perusals of at least the Facebook side was concerned that I didn't see any response to the residents who are complaining about something. We have to set up a system to respond to that. It needs to be done immediately. Don't know yet how we're going to monitor it because I'm not sure how those platforms work, but I guess I'm going to have to learn. And we'll need to start responding because that's our public face, especially in the modern world to the younger generation that are looking to relocate. They probably go to the Facebooks and the Twitters and whatever other social media is out there. Need to make sure that we respond, and if there's some way to sort of move the bad news off to the side and move the good news up, let's change our design on our webpage.
I guess why I asked that is because being Detroit is a neighboring city with a lot of new amenities and different creations. Do you think that'd be a resource as well? Even though it's not, because you speak on Macomb County, but a neighboring city like Detroit and connecting those cities, which Detroit is the borderline of, 8 Mile to Eastpointe. Do you think you can make some connections and resources with that?
Well, at least I personally know the finance director for the city of Detroit. So if there's anything that potentially could work out between the two cities, I do have a contact with the city of Detroit. So it's not like I don't have a door into the community. Mm-hmm. So we just have to find out where those synergies are. Same thing with the neighboring communities, Harper Woods, St. Clair Shores, Warren. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's something that everyone can offer. Matter of fact, I know the cable operator in the city of Warren. Maybe something that we might be able to work out to at least evaluate the system here in Eastpointe. So little things here and there.
Well, I guess, I don't know if I'm saying it right. Well, using surrounding cities' resources to bring people to our city. So like when I said Detroit is a growing city, their resources will bring more people to our city because everybody might not want to move back to Detroit.
Right. And I have to be careful how I word this. The neighborhood in Detroit south of Eastpointe is not the same neighborhood it was 20 years ago. And if people are looking for a good place to live, raise a family, safe place, Eastpointe is that bedroom community with access to I-94, goes into downtown. You've got 8 Mile that goes off to the west, 696 to go into the western suburbs. The roads are there. You have to concentrate on spreading the good news about why it's good to live in the community. So I'm going back to that Foxconn example that I gave. Is there something in Eastpointe that we could give to a large developer that's coming in that's going to be looking for potential housing for new residents potentially moving in? I don't have that answer at this present time. I still have a lot of learning to do. But that's where I would be going with something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone have other questions?
I'll just ask a really quick one, because I don't want to show up and then, bring all these new questions. But you've talked a lot about finance. So if expenditures in a fund are expected or inevitably going to go over the budgeted amount, would you bring a budget amendment before spending those funds?
By law, Public Act 2 of 1968, funds are not to be expended if they will incur an over expenditure in the approved budget until such time that the legislative body approves the budget. Now, it depends on how the legislative body approves the budget. Like I said, when I was in Pontiac in my last year, we had a completely clean audit, meaning no over expenditures in any account. And the reason that happened is there was flexibility in the way that the budget was approved that allowed me as the city administrator to move funds from area to area. And as long as the total budget was not going to be expended, I was not required to go to City Council or the Transition Advisory Board, and I had 2 steps in this instance to obtain a budget amendment. The key is knowing, number one, gap, so you know how the spending rules will fall into place. It's not when the bill comes in, it's when the service or the good is received, so you know what fiscal year it gets posted to, number one. Number 2, know well in advance if certain large purchases are actually going to meet that spending rule under GAAP. So whether or not you do have some flexibility, and hopefully by that time you have a budget being prepared and maybe even approved for the next fiscal year where you can have some ability for flexibility. But definitely, I'm not I guess you can say, a line item person, because I understand it's the bigger picture. I'm not going to worry about a 25-cent pencil. I'm going to be worried about a $20 million contribution to a pension fund, for example. Yes, things happen. Hopefully there's a little bit of a contingency, or some people have some savings. We do what we need to do. I did it. It was successful in Pontiac. Like I said, no budget amendments in my last year. Officially, no budget amendments. I'm not saying we didn't move money here and there, but it worked, and we even increased our fund balance.
That's it.
That's it?
All right.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Vetrano, did you have any other comment for our candidate?
I will walk our candidate out. I appreciate his time and yours. I will return, and then we will maybe take a quick recess and then discuss for a little bit, if that's okay with the mayor.
Because you need to go pick up your kids.
Yeah, that'll take
Okay.
5 minutes, so 5-minute window.
I'll
Okay.
appreciate
For a
it too.
quick